The congressional hearing room fell into an uneasy silence as Pam Bondi stepped purposefully toward the witness table. Her navy blue suit, immaculately pressed, cut a sharp silhouette against the oak-paneled walls. She carried no entourage, no dramatic gestures, only a thick leather binder tucked under one arm and the quiet assurance of someone who had come prepared for war. Across the chamber, Representative Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone, her crimson blazer gleaming under the lights. Cameras snapped furiously as reporters captured every detail of her poised expression. For nearly a year, Crockett had made herself into a household name, fierce, unrelenting, and unapologetically progressive. The 42-year-old congresswoman from Texas had electrified her party's base with fiery speeches condemning what she called systemic Republican manipulation of the democratic process. Her reputation as a political brawler had only grown as she chaired high-profile hearings with biting soundbites that spread like wildfire online. Just moments earlier, she had declared to the packed room and national audience, "Republicans are undermining our democracy, and no one has brought forward evidence to prove otherwise." It was a bold statement, one meant to crush dissent before it could speak. But what happened in the next 30 seconds would not only silence the room, it would shift the course of congressional oversight and perhaps forever tarnish the legacy of a rising political star. Pam Bondi wasn't supposed to be there. The committee had expected a junior GOP legal advisor, someone Crockett had outmaneuvered and humiliated in previous sessions. The last-minute substitution was dismissed by Crockett with a whisper to her aide, another desperate Republican move. "Let's wrap this up quickly." But Bondi hadn't come to play defense. She had come with receipts. Weeks of quiet preparation had culminated in this moment. Bondi, Florida's first female attorney general and a key figure in Trump's first impeachment defense, had compiled a devastating cache of documents, affidavits, audio recordings, internal communications, and sworn testimonies. Her strategy was precise. Her demeanor was ice. As Bondi took her seat at the witness table, the atmosphere was electric. She opened her binder methodically and waited for the questioning to begin. Crockett smiled tightly. "Ms. Bondi," she began, her voice dripping with formality, "thank you for your last-minute appearance, though I must say the substitution is highly irregular. Nevertheless, I'll get straight to the point." She shuffled a thick packet of papers in front of her with performative flair. "4 months, this committee has been investigating Republican interference across 5 swing states. My office has documented at least 17 instances where GOP officials allegedly attempted to alter election results. Would you agree this constitutes a direct threat to our democracy?" It was a trap, cleverly crafted to force Bondi into either denying the claim outright or appearing to justify illegal activity. A few Democratic committee members nodded approvingly. Crockett's tone suggested she expected nothing but feeble deflection. But Bondi didn't flinch. "Respectfully, Representative Crockett," she said, her voice steady, "I cannot agree with a premise that hasn't been factually established. I'd like to address each of those 17 claims, if the committee permits." Crockett's expression tightened. "We don't have time for delay tactics, Ms. Bondi," she shot back. "A simple yes or no will suffice." Bondi replied calmly, "The American people deserve more than simplistic answers to complex questions, especially when careers and reputations are on the line." The committee chairman interjected, "The witness will be allowed to respond fully." Bondi nodded, opened her binder, and began. Her first challenge came as Crockett interrupted again, this time raising a document high into the air for the cameras to see. "This affidavit," she said, "comes from a county election official in Georgia who claims direct pressure from Republican leadership to find discrepancies in Democratic districts. Are you denying this happened?" The room froze. The affidavit had been a cornerstone of Crockett's narrative, widely cited and unchallenged, until now. Bondi calmly turned to a separate tab in her binder and placed a document on the display screen. "I'm familiar with that affidavit, Representative. What you haven't shown is a second, sworn statement from that same official, dated 3 weeks later, recanting several claims and stating that his original words were taken out of context." The murmur that spread across the hearing room was unmistakable. Crockett blinked. That document isn't in the official record, she said flatly. No, Bondi replied, which raises important questions about why exculpatory evidence was excluded from this committee's review. The chairman leaned forward. Ms. Bondi, are you suggesting material evidence was withheld? I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Chairman, Bondi answered. I'm stating facts. And I have 16 more factual corrections to present. Crockett's aide leaned into her ear, whispering something urgent. The congresswoman straightened in her chair, eyes narrowing. She was beginning to realize this wasn't going to be just another victory lap. It was a reckoning. Crockett tried to recover. Her posture stiffened as she leaned forward into her microphone, desperation masked beneath a layer of bravado. Ms. Bondi, she said, voice slightly elevated, one recantation doesn't invalidate the pattern we've uncovered across multiple states. I agree, Bondi replied, her tone still unervingly calm. Which is why I've brought documentation addressing each of your 17 claims. What I'm presenting today are court filings, recorded depositions, and full-length transcripts, many from the very sources your team has referenced, only in their entirety. She reached into her binder and began distributing copies to the committee. Journalists in the back of the room stood, straining to capture each movement. Social media feeds exploded as live streams were clipped and shared with captions like, Pam Bondi brings the receipts. Bondi continued methodically. Here is a timeline correction on the Arizona incident. Here is a notarized affidavit contradicting the Michigan claim. And this, she tapped a printed email chain, is internal correspondence from a Pennsylvania official who says they were misquoted in your office's report. The clicks of phones and keyboards filled the room as committee members flipped through the documents. Representative Crockett's jaw clenched. She had built her case carefully, knowing the political optics were as vital as the evidence itself. Weeks of press conferences, op-eds, and committee speeches had painted a clear picture of partisan manipulation. She wasn't just trying to expose misconduct, she was shaping a movement. And now, in a matter of minutes, it was unraveling. Still, she pressed on, shifting tactics. Ms. Bondi, she began again, this time with unmistakable edge, you were a key member of President Trump's impeachment defense team. How can anyone take your testimony here as impartial? It was the pivot she had been saving, a personal attack when facts grew inconvenient. Bondi didn't hesitate. My background is public record, representative, she replied, fixing her gaze squarely on Crockett. But what matters today isn't who I am. It's the evidence I've brought. Documents, signatures, timestamps. And none of it came from partisan sources, it came from your own witnesses. The room held its breath. The chairman looked unsettled. Perhaps we should break to review the materials presented. But Bondi wasn't done. Before we recess, Mr. Chairman, she said, pulling a final sheet from her folder, there's one more document the committee needs to see. She placed it on the overhead display. The screen flickered, then froze on a damning image. An email. From Jasmine Crockett's official congressional account. Subject line. Exculpatory materials from GA official. The body of the email was brief. Blunt. It read, bury it. Doesn't help our narrative. The effect was immediate and explosive. Voices erupted across the room. Staffers turned white. A few Democratic members turned to Crockett in disbelief. Journalists sprinted from the room, phones to ears, already dictating headlines. Representative Crockett sat frozen, eyes fixed on the screen. The color drained from her face. The chairman pounded the gavel, shouting for order. The committee will come to order. But there was no controlling what had been unleashed. Within seconds, screenshots of the email were trending on every major platform. Commentators were already weighing in live. Hashtags #Crockett collapse and #Bondi bombshell dominated Twitter. Cable news anchors broke into programming to report the development. Across the table, Pam Bondi remained composed, hands folded neatly atop her binder, as if she had expected this moment all along. This isn't political theater, she said evenly, her voice cutting through the din like a scalpel. This is about the integrity of congressional oversight. And the American people deserve to know when truth has been deliberately suppressed. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel strike. Finally, a senior Democratic member leaned into his mic. "Mr. Chairman, I move that we suspend this hearing pending full review of Ms. Bondi's materials and an independent investigation into the claims raised." It was a lifeline, a procedural pause to stop the bleeding. Bondi nodded slightly. "I respect the committee's process," she said, "but for the record, every document I've presented has been independently authenticated. The affidavits have been notarized. The digital evidence carries verifiable timestamps. And the email you just saw was confirmed by forensic analysts." Then she turned directly to Crockett. "4 months, you've told the American people that your case was built on truth, that you were exposing corruption. But what you've actually done is craft a narrative using selectively edited statements, withheld documents, and now we know, deliberate instructions to hide contradictory evidence." The impact was crushing. Crockett finally found her voice, but it was unsteady. "This is a coordinated smear, a political hit job disguised as testimony." Bondi didn't even blink. "The only coordination I'm aware of, Representative," she said softly, "is the email from your account instructing your staff to bury evidence." A long, suffocating pause settled over the room. Then came the final blow. "Mr. Chairman," a Republican member said, "given the ethical implications of what we've just seen, I move that this matter be referred to the House Ethics Committee for immediate investigation." Gasps rippled through the chamber, this time not divided along party lines. Pam Bondi gathered her materials with clinical precision, her final words ringing with the authority of someone who had just dismantled months of political theater with a binder full of truth. "When we sacrifice facts for convenience, Representative, we don't just damage our opponents, we damage democracy itself." By the time the hearing recessed, the Capitol was in full crisis mode. Jasmine Crockett remained seated, motionless, while her aides scrambled around her, whispering strategy and damage control. But there was no containing what had just erupted in front of a live national audience. She had entered the room a rising star, a bold defender of democracy. She left it under a storm of doubt, her integrity hanging by a thread. Outside the chamber, a media frenzy had already begun. Every major news network had gone live. Screens were filled with the now infamous email, overlaid with dramatic headlines. "Bury it. Congresswoman under fire for withholding evidence. Pam Bondi unleashes shock documents at oversight hearing. Collapse of a political narrative, in real time." Commentators who had once praised Crockett's relentless pursuit of justice were now stumbling to reassess the story. Some clung to the hope that context would rescue her. Others, more pragmatic, admitted the damage was likely irreversible. That night, Crockett's office released a carefully worded statement. Representative Crockett remains committed to electoral integrity and transparency. Her office is currently reviewing the materials presented and will respond through the proper channels. But the statement was too vague, too late. The next morning, the House Ethics Committee announced a preliminary inquiry into the suppression of exculpatory evidence. Remarkably, the decision was supported by both parties, a rarity in today's hyperpolarized climate. And behind it all was Pam Bondi. Her quiet, methodical approach was now being praised across editorial pages and op-eds. Headlines described her as the reluctant truth-teller, the woman who brought receipts, and calm in the eye of the political storm. Conservative media celebrated her as a hero. But even centrist and liberal outlets were forced to acknowledge that what had happened in that hearing room was not just a partisan win, it was a moment of reckoning for political accountability. The real cost. Inside the Capitol, the fallout spread fast. 2 of Crockett's senior aides resigned within 48 hours. At least 3 witnesses who had testified in earlier hearings came forward, claiming that their statements had been selectively edited or taken out of context in Crockett's reports. One by one, Crockett's Democratic colleagues began to distance themselves. A senior member, once one of her closest allies, went on record. "If the evidence we've now seen had been available earlier, I would not have supported the previous recommendations. The integrity of this process matters more than party loyalty." Behind closed doors, there was talk of removing Crockett from the Oversight Committee entirely. What had once been a platform for her political ascent was now a stage haunted by scandal. And then came the final nail. 10 days after the hearing, the Oversight Committee released a statement. After a thorough review, this committee has determined that key pieces of exculpatory evidence were deliberately omitted from the investigation's record. As a result, previous conclusions are no longer considered valid. They didn't name Crockett. They didn't need to. The damage was done. Her legacy, her brand as a fearless truth-teller, had imploded under the weight of a single 6-word email. Bury it doesn't help our narrative. The new standard. Pam Bondi, meanwhile, returned quietly to Florida. She gave only one interview. In it, she was asked if she had anticipated the scale of the fallout. Her answer was simple. I didn't come to win an argument. I came to tell the truth. Our system only works when the facts matter more than the headlines. That quote was replayed across networks, clipped into campaign ads, and taught in political science classes weeks later. Because what Bondi had done wasn't just dismantle one congresswoman's case, it had forced a national conversation about the standards we expect from our leaders and the role of truth in a post-truth era. And perhaps most tellingly, a new phrase entered the political lexicon. To pull a Crockett. To suppress evidence for narrative control, only to be publicly exposed. It became a warning, a lesson, and for politicians in every corner of the country, a reminder that the spotlight burns brighter when the truth finally catches up. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth political coverage. Comment below with your thoughts on how this confrontation might change congressional oversight going forward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next analysis.